Welcome to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. My guest on today's podcast is a mother and a transgender son, Marsha. And how do I say your last name, Marsha?
Aizumi.
Aizumi, Aizumi. And Marsha is here in my home in Salt Lake City. She lives in California, but is here for a conference. And over the phone, it'll be a little staticky, but I think you'll hear Aiden just fine. Aiden is driving in a car just after work in LA County. Welcome to the podcast, Aiden.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And do you take your middle name? Your mom told me your middle name, or do you take your last name? What should we call you, Aiden?
I use Aiden and just my last name. I mean, I have my middle name, but I don't use it very often.
I like your middle name, by the way. But okay, so, and this is a podcast for our listeners. Most of our listeners are of the Latter-day Saint Christian faith, and neither Marsha or Aiden have been involved with the Latter-day Saint faith. They grew up in a different faith. But a stake president in Long Beach had Marsha and Aiden speak a couple times to that stake. Emerson First, who's the stake president at Long Beach East Stake, sponsored an interfaith breakfast where he heard Aiden and Marsha speak, and then had Marsha come speak, and then later had Marsha and Aiden come speak to that local stake. So we wanted to do what President First is doing and just have these two good people share their story. Will you just introduce what that's, Aiden, or if you can, will you introduce what that CCEJ Interfaith Breakfast was?
So my mom might be able to explain it a little better, but if I'm recalling correctly, it's an interfaith and intercultural breakfast gathering, basically, that's held in Long Beach. And they usually have a theme, and the theme they had selected kind of tied in really well with our story and just our experience. And so we were invited to be a part of that as keynote speakers and to share kind of a little bit about our experience with the hope of kind of finding more of that human connection versus, I think, some of the things that tend to be barriers, for people when you're looking at things from a different lens or a different viewpoint.
And that was deeply moving to lots of people. I think Marsha's told me she spoke over 200 times. She does this full time around the country.
With Aiden.
With Aiden, yes. Most of the time.
Uh-huh.
So both of you have spoken 200 times. And I just recognize that, Aiden, when I had to learn about transgender people from transgender people. It didn't work for cis people to tell me about trans people. And so when I started to listen to trans people, just like President First, everything shifted for me. And so I'm glad he was able to come to that breakfast along with his dear wife, Darcy. And then I know that I'm just reading his text here, that both of you spoke to members of the High Council, the stake presidency bishops, and Relief Society presidents, and also met with a small group from the High Council. So you have changed a lot of hearts, both of you, in the LDS faith, particularly in that area of Long Beach where many people heard your story. And that's, for our listeners, what really led to this podcast is to have you two, even though you're not of the LDS faith, help us understand better our transgender friends and also this beautiful love story between, Marsha and Aiden. And now Aiden's married, and congratulations. So that's kind of an overview for our listeners, and we're just going to spend the rest of the time sharing the story. So Aiden, will you I think you're 31 now.
And that is correct. Yeah, 31.
And have a really good job. But take us back to when, just when you started on this journey where you realized that you weren't straight or cis, and just share that journey with our listeners.
Sure. I mean, I could take you back pretty far.
Good.
I think I always knew, even as a young child, that I was different from my peers. I just think I didn't have the language or the terminology to really express what that was for me. And I would say that goes back to being, I would say probably around beginning of elementary school years, um, from the age that I could really identify the things that I was interested in. It was, I think, a completely different than expectation or the hope that I think my parents had for me, or sort of as a stereotypical young girl. Um, I was into pretty much everything my younger brother was into, which was like trucks and cars and Power Rangers and martial arts, uh, and pretty much things that in the early 90s were still pretty gender, um, I think, gender specific activities that tended to be geared towards young boys. And so I remember, like, friends never gave me a hard time about that. But I definitely did not have a lot of female friends who were doing the same activities that I was doing or interested in the same things that I was interested in. I connected the most with male peers. But I really didn't understand why I had this sort of connection, or why I felt so much like a part of, like a part of that group, being one of the boys or kind of having a lot of male friends. The terminology was so foreign, I think, to me, let alone like accessible to, I think, just people in general. So it was not even a thought that crossed my mind. I also learned, though, that being different was kind of uncomfortable, and that not all kids are nice about people who are different. And so I learned really quickly to not talk about some of the things that I was interested in, or that would draw unnecessary attention to myself. And that kind of, I think that's what sort of prolonged this self-exploration and sort of kind of my coming out until much later. So I think in elementary school, I definitely identified as a tomboy. I dressed pretty much like all of my male peers did, shorts and t-shirts, and like specifically like shorts, not that shorts and t-shirts are specifically male, but the shorts and t-shirts that I was wearing were definitely from what boys department of, a store. And that sort of carried on for me, like all the way through I got to be in middle school. And I think that was where, for me, I realized just how different I was from my peers. Was people became very interested in how you look and how you dress and the things you're wearing and the groups you're a part of. And I found myself in this weird place where I couldn't really find a group to belong to, or that I felt like I could fit with. I had friends that I had kept from elementary school, and they, they were interested in joining the drill team, which was kind of like our middle school's version of cheerleading. They were interested in the boys that they thought were cute. And the male peers that I had sort of felt this connection with when I was younger, they didn't really consider me part of their group anymore, because it was sort of a boys only club. And so I kind of found myself like stuck between two different groups, because I felt most connected to the boys who felt like I was still a girl and therefore could not be part of that group. And it caused me a lot of anxiety. I struggled a lot with anxiety and depression.
That's awesome.
And so it just got hard to be sort of like social, because I just didn't know what to do anymore. I didn't know who I was really. I didn't have a really good sense of self. I didn't really have a strong friend base anymore, because of just the changes that we all went through as young people, and it kind of caused me a lot of anxiety to try to figure out how I was supposed to navigate life at that point, as somebody who didn't really fit in to any group that I saw at that time. When I got to be in high school, I kind of thought maybe things would be a little bit better. I went to a pretty big high school. My high school had close to 4,000 students at that time. To my knowledge, I think it's actually increased since then. And so I figured statistically, I'm okay. Well, I should say I'm terrible at math. But I thought statistically that, my odds of finding somebody who was like myself or who had similar interests to me or just kind of maybe didn't fit the traditional mold, there had to be one person maybe out of these 4,000 people, aside from myself. And I just could not find that person. And if anything, like I was so off base because the social pressures to fit in to a particular group or to have a group in high school was much stronger than I had anticipated it being. It was something that happened on TV. There was like jocks, and then there was like, all these groups that you hear about, and I'd watch on TV, and I just thought, this is not real, right? Like, that's not how life is, but it definitely is real. It's not maybe as dramatic, but those groups exist. And I was fortunate to have sort of a home base. I played golf since I was about the age of my dad. They really, really wanted my brother and I to be professional golfers, and raised us sort of with that hope and dream in mind. And so I played golf all 4 years of high school, and played relatively well. And so I did have a connection there, and I think that was really what made high school mostly tolerable, or made it so that I wasn't as isolated. But when I got to my sophomore year of high school, that was kind of where I made the decision to come out the first time, based on the knowledge that I had, and which was limited. My family in particular, I don't ever remember us like talking about sexuality. And if anything, it wasn't something that came up. So I guess maybe that's why too, just never came up. So we never talked about it. But I just figured from my limited exposure to information that I thought that at that time I was a lesbian because of my attraction to women that I think I knew I had at a very young age. But I had no understanding of gender identity or the trans community. And so I came out, and unfortunately my school was not really prepared for supporting me as a young LGBT student. The students at my school were also really not receptive to that. And so school became exponentially more difficult.
Wow.
To the point where my senior year of high school, I just decided I was not going to go back to school. I had one semester of school left, and I just was having just kind of daily anxiety attacks and struggling to sort of to just function, right, to be a student and to pay attention in class and learn. And so I just told my mom I can't go back to school. And she, her background is in education. And so she was not going to just accept this, that her high school student was going to drop out of high school with one semester of school left, and went to the school to try to find a way for me to still be able to finish, which she was very successful in doing. And so I finished high school with basically through an independent study style format where I was given assignments from home. I could email them to my teachers, but did not really have to physically be on campus and be around people who were not going to be, supportive or kind of understanding of who I was as a person, as a young sort of LGBT person. Sort of running parallel to that, I know you had mentioned before, my mom and I, we didn't grow up in the LDS church, but we did go to a local church that my childhood friend, a bunch of us went to the same church, but my childhood friend father was the pastor of, so it kind of fit nicely that we all went there, and then we all go to school together. And it was a church that I was baptized in, and I went through confirmation in, and unfortunately, when I had come out, a visiting minister at the church also decided that place was not going to be suitable for me to continue to attend and to be a part of. And so I sort of was like, I guess as a family, even like church had been a social place and a social community for us. And school, obviously, at that age is a place of community for a young person. And so I didn't have really any, other than my family, like remaining sort of social community spaces that I could go to and be like accepted and feel safe in.
Wow.
Let's see. I think I'm trying to figure out where I'm at now in my timeline. 30 years is a long time. I'm learning the longer we do this, the harder it is to keep up with. I have more stuff I have to add, you know.
Just a comment for our listeners.
Sure.
This, you know, the goal of this podcast, I think, if you're LGBTQ, is to be able to hear somebody like Aiden's story, so that you have somebody that's been on this road for, you know, Aiden's been on this road for 16 years or more, 20 years. And I think, you know, I'm just glad we are hearing his story, but I also think it's really helpful for parents and local leaders. Marsha's going to talk about her role as a parent with, you know, and how she navigated this. And it's a beautiful story of a family coming together. It's just a love story. I call it a love story of, as I've heard these two talk, I watched a little YouTube video today, and they're just really helpful for parents on how you walk this space and keep your family together, and with probably very little initial training. And that's why I think their advocacy group work is so important, to mentor other parents as they're starting to walk this road earlier in the process. So do you want to share anything at this point, Marsha, or should we just have Aiden continue to share more of his story?
Yeah, if he can continue, because he's kind of at the lesbian stage, and so we want to
get him into the trans stage.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
I got it.
And for our listeners, just so everybody knows, Aiden's in a car in California, and Marsha's here in Salt Lake, and Aiden's wife is driving out. And so we're just praying that you drive safely, you two, and we don't hear any crunching sounds in the background.
Yes,
no, yeah, she's a safe driver. I don't let too many other people drive me anywhere. I prefer to drive, so I'm in safe hands.
We know California traffic's non-existent, so we're just flying along really fast. So we'll anyway.
Now we've hit it now, so we're going 20 miles an hour.
There you go. Well, there you go. All right, Aiden, so, pick up your story, my friend.
Sure. Yeah. So I did. You know, I'm fortunate. My parents. Specifically, I think in this instance, my mom was willing to go and advocate for me to finish school. And so I do have I finished with my high school diploma. And I had applied to go to college. But I really was not mentally in a place that I could have handled that. And so I opted to not go straight to a 4-year university, and decided to take some classes at my local community college. And to kind of allow myself that time, I felt like that I thought maybe I would get over my anxiety, or I would just, you know, meet other people, or something would happen that would make it so I could, I think, live a little bit more of a fulfilling life, and not just be filled with anxiety and stay in my house all the time. And I still really did not have an understanding of trans people, of the trans community, of gender identity. I thought that gender and gender was just the cards you were given are the cards you were given, and you sort of make do with that. And so I had been going to a therapist who had encouraged me to really start to branch out and try to become more engaged with my local LGBT community, whether that be groups or events. She just sort of gave me the task of attending something to try to give myself more community and a sense of support, and some kind of system that was not just my family, but also people that maybe identified similarly to me. And so I opted, strangely enough, I think it's sort of funny, because I had all this anxiety and could barely leave my parents' house. Instead of opting to go to a nice support group meeting somewhere, I opted to go to Long Beach Pride, which is one of the larger pride festivals here in Southern California. And And that was really for me the first time I had seen just how diverse the LGBT community could be, and just its representation, and whether it was something as simple as hairstyles or clothing to just this broad spectrum of identities. And so that for me was my exposure to learning about gender and just different gender identities, and kind of planted the seed in my head, I think, about why I felt this connection to that. And it felt very familiar. And yet I never had heard the words or like used them myself. And so I started doing a lot of research, not very calmly. Of course, I immediately was like panicked beyond belief, because I felt like I had already come out. So I already knew who I was. And of course, like what 17-year-old doesn't think they already know who they are completely. And so I started asking my local PFLAG chapter, a parent there, for some support. They had shared they had a transgender child, and so I reached out to them to try to get some support and like just the sounding board. And after a couple years of really kind of milling this over and trying it on for size on my own, sort of in the safety of our PFLAG like youth support group, or trying it on like in the I had joined like a mentoring program where I had a mentor, kind of trying it on in these spaces that I felt like maybe I'll see if I like this or not. And I ultimately decided like it finally felt like myself, like to try it on, which I thought was sort of funny, was just to try it on, but that felt more real than just being who I thought I was. And so ultimately then I decided, basically just before my 21st birthday, to come out again to my parents and to my family, and let them know that how I identified as transgender, that I was planning to and would really like to transition to male, and I just kind of hoped that they were going to be supportive of that, and still love me for who I was.
And so that's 10 years ago. And I really appreciate you just kind of walking through our listeners some of the resources you went to understand. I love therapy, and I love people that are clinically trained helping us make good decisions. Do you want to keep telling your story at this point? Or Marsha, do you want to talk about his life from your perspective up until 21?
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in at this point, okay. Richard. Thank you so much. I didn't have a clue about much, like
and
Aiden
I don't know,
said,
Aiden, if you can mute your phone. Why we're hearing a fair amount of static, but it may not be from your phone. So we'll just keep talking. Okay. Go ahead, Marsha.
All right. Okay. So I didn't know a lot, just like Aiden was saying. And it was, so I was a mother that really was confused many times, just struggling to figure out what was going on. And so I think in the beginning, I just hoped that it would go away. And that's kind of an Asian thing too. You avoid it and maybe things would change. You won't have to deal with it. But obviously I could see that things weren't changing. Aiden didn't mention, he said he was withdrawn and depressed, but he didn't mention that he eventually was diagnosed agoraphobic, and also he was suicidal.
I think you're being honest about his emotional health, and most of the LGBTQ youth that I hear through this stage, depression and suicide or suicidal thoughts are pretty common, and you're kind of sharing that, and that's pretty scary for a parent.
Right. And so I think once Aiden came out as lesbian and things didn't get better, it was just a sign that there was something else that needed to be done. And we just didn't know. Like Aiden, he didn't know about the trans community, and I didn't either. So I went to PFLAG, which is a national organization, and it's a support group. And I listened to other stories, and I heard people that were struggling like me, and I heard people who had faced challenges and had been successful. So I just continued to go to get support. Aiden didn't mention that he was physically assaulted on a number of occasions.
Wow.
And so it was scary for me. Usually I don't like to go to a support group and kind of bare your soul. That's just not the Asian way, because I am Japanese American. But when your child is being, hurt physically, then you look for any place to get answers to help. And because Aiden had come out as lesbian and wasn't getting any better, he wasn't happier, he wasn't, he was going out and doing things, but you could just tell his spirit was still very dark and sad and alone. So actually, when Aiden came out as transgender, it was a place where I felt like, okay, we have to look at this. We have to look at this place because it may be the place that we need to go, the path we need to go for our child to be happy and successful. Now, through this whole journey of all I'm talking about, I went through a lot of emotions, and I've heard people say, "Oh, I celebrated when my child came out." I did not.
It's honest.
I felt so much shame. And I wasn't ashamed of him. I was ashamed of me. Aiden is adopted from Japan, and all I wanted to be when he was placed in my arms was a good mother. And I thought, oh my gosh, I failed at the most important thing. So anyway, I had to go through this process of overcoming shame. My husband and I had to overcome this grief and sadness, because here we had a daughter for 20 years. And now, what do we do with that? To embrace our son, how do we let go of that? So there was a grieving period for us. And of course, when people become transgender, when people come out as transgender, there's pronoun changes and name changes. And so my husband and I just struggled with that, which was really frustrating for Aiden. And yet he tried to be so patient with us. But, my husband took, I don't know, Aiden, Papa says a year. You and I think it was more like 18 months, So, but it was just a long time for Aiden to have to hear wrong pronouns and names and, and we're trying to get there and he's trying to be patient, but it's hard. So, there was that sadness and grieving that we went through. And of course, initially there was just a tremendous amount of fear. What kind of life is he going to have? Is he going to find love? How is the society going to treat him? Can he find a job where he can just be himself and not have to hide who he is? So initially we went through a lot of really negative feelings. And so, for people out there, just know that it is a journey, it is a process. And for some people, it may be shorter than others. But for us, I think today we feel like we have really dealt with the challenges and the feelings. And my shame today, I am so proud of him. And I think that this was one of the gifts that LDS meeting gave me. Was one of the people made a comment, and it was Emerson called, I don't remember her name, but he called her sister. So it's just one of the leaders, I think, in the group. And she said, Aiden, you could be angry and bitter and hateful, listening to all the things that have happened to you, but you are kind and compassionate and confident. And so I think, that this journey that we've been on, the support that we've been given, the resources have allowed Aiden not to sit in this dark place. And he has come to a place where he wants to give back because we've been given so much. So, much of our grief, I think, today is gratitude for all the people that have been around us, and a lot of joy being together, knowing that we are a family and we're connected so deeply with love and appreciation. And our fear, I think, has really transformed into hope. And I think hope comes from not only the people that encourage us, but the people that are willing to listen to our story with open hearts and, willing to try to understand who we are as human beings. And so that, I think, has been some of the transformation that our family has gone through. I mean, I am so grateful for you, Richard, to have us on to share our story with your readers. I am so grateful to Emerson and Darcy and that community. I mean, to be honest, we were a little bit nervous going into that community based on what we had heard about not being really open. And I think that's been another gift that we've been given through the journey with the LDS community, to know there are a lot of loving people out there that are trying to support our community. And they're just trying to figure it out, just like I figured it out as a mother. I didn't have the answers in the beginning. I was just really led by love. And it makes me cry when you say that this is a love story between a mother and a son, because really that is, I think, the power of our story is the love, and the love we get from the community and from our family and the people around us that have given us so much courage to be authentic and share our story and cry like I am.
Well, on behalf of all of our listeners, Marsha, we'd all just like to give you a big hug because of your tender heart and being so honest. And that's what a great sign to me of strength, is to be so honest with how difficult it was, and the shame you felt, not for Aiden, but just how you described it. I think that's a sign of strength. You can talk about that and the grief and the wondering, and I think that just helps others like me that are new on this road, and other parents go, I can identify with Marsha because she's pretty real.
Oh,
and she's pretty honest, and you can feel her good heart and wanting to do the right thing and her love for Aiden. Aiden, one of the questions in my mind is, just how are you doing? How I measure our kids' lives, by, are they happy? Are they being able to hold down a job, pursuing their dreams? Is their emotional health in a good spot? So we've got 6 kids at our home, and no one's quite your age yet, so we're all a little younger at our home, but most of them have left the home. And share with our listeners just how you're doing, because obviously you went through a really, really dark period of time, and now you're a transgender man, and you've been identifying as that for, I think, 10 years. Just share with our listeners how you're doing, and to give us an idea of how you've been able to move forward in your life, or anything else you'd like to share, because you two share the story quite a bit, so I want to make sure you share what you want to share.
Sure. Let's see here. Try to figure out my own timeline. It took me a couple of years after I came out and sort of started my transition, and for me, my transition really was both socially and medically involved. So I did want to take hormones, and I wanted to have, sorry, there's a couple motorcycles, so I was going to wait a second. For me, so I did want to have top surgery, and I wanted to be on hormones. And then there was the process of changing my name and sort of doing all the court documents and all those things. And it took me time to adjust every time something like that happened, just because I had to sort of find my footing again and figure out how is it that I fit into this sort of world, and who am I when I interact with other people, and kind of, I think, all these things that probably I also went through, sort of going through the age of puberty and sort of being a young adult and figuring out who I was. I was kind of doing all that again, except I was in my early 20s. And so that was a little bit of a struggle. But once I figured out a little bit more, because I think, as human beings, we're always kind of learning and evolving and changing. And but when I finally kind of got, I think, the core of who I was at a more foundational level, I decided I wanted to go back to school. I had started dating Mary, who who's now my wife, but when we were starting to date, she had encouraged me to try to consider going on to continue to do my bachelor's degree, which I had sort of dismissed college at that point. Right after high school, I had mentioned I went to community college. I was not very successful because I was still so sort of detached from my own life. I really was barely functional, so I think I could barely handle day-to-day life, let alone, writing essays and going to class and doing all that. And so I had been on academic probation at like 2 different colleges. And so when I was in a much better place and I kind of started going back to school, she had mentioned, why don't you try to like transfer to a university and get your degree? And I was like, I don't know if college is really for me. I don't know if I'm an academic, I'm kind of just a free spirit. I'm just gonna work and do my own thing. And but I ultimately, after we had discussed that for a while, I decided I would try. And so I retook all my classes, replaced all my failed grades, and then I transferred to a local university here called the University of Laverne, which is a small liberal arts school. And then in 2015, I finished my bachelor's degree in liberal studies, which was supposed to sort of put me on the track to be a teacher, because I had felt like I struggled so much in school that maybe I would be able to help a young person who was similar to myself, just by being there as a teacher, and to be a support or someone that a student could come to. And so I decided I would do that. And ultimately, by the end of my bachelor's degree program, decided that I actually did not want to be a teacher, that the actual act of teaching did not sound like something I really wanted to commit my life to. I love education. I love the act of learning, the curiosity that comes with it, the look on students' faces when they get something, but the act of standing in front of a classroom and trying to teach lessons to young people did not sound appealing to me at all. And so I thought maybe I'd go into counseling. I really fell back in love with learning. And so after I finished my degree, I decided I'd go back to school again, do my master's degree, and tried to do the school counseling program. And I also just felt like there was just a lot of politics and bureaucracy involved in that, that would limit my impact, I think, on young people. So I changed courses again, which I'm really good at. I probably picked 25 careers throughout my adolescence that I thought I would do.
When you're old like me, and you'll be more at peace that you tried a lot of different things. So
I still am constantly trying to figure out what I want to do I tell my students what I want to do when I grow up. And they're like, but you're already grown up, and I'm like, that's what you think, but well, I don't know. I decided I would go to, I continue still my master's. They had started a brand new program, which is around technology used in education. So whether that's computer programs or apps on the iPads or using textbooks that are digital, whatever that may be, just sort of the integration of technology into schools, which is obviously very applicable now. They opened that up, and it was the second sort of cohort of this program they were running, that happened to be started by a professor that I really admire and was very supportive of me throughout my university experience. And so I decided that's what my master's would be in. So I ended up doing that program, finishing my master's last May, so May of 2018. So I have my master's in education with an emphasis in education technology, and I'm working for a public charter school here in Southern California, and I do compliance work, which isn't glamorous at all, but I also help to run our sports program for 4 locations. So we're just providing sort of a social emotional space for students to engage with each other, but also play sports and kind of have access to something they may not have had access to because our program is independent study format. So they're not in a classroom setting that's like a traditional classroom. So I'm doing that. My mom mentioned I got married, so I've been married since November of 2013 to Mary, who I had started dating not long after I started my transition, and who is safely driving me to my destination currently.
Way to go, Mary.
I know. I think, thankfully, there hasn't been too many crazy drivers today, so we're pretty good. But yeah, and so we met actually at our PFLAG chapter meeting, and I don't know, like I tend to be able to tell pretty quickly if I can get along with somebody, and Mary and I seem to just get along really well pretty quickly. We had both. I was dating somebody else at that time, but we just hit it off as friends, and kind of I think that's what sort of made our relationship really strong, was that when we met, there wasn't any sort of expectation, or the intention wasn't to date. It was that we were friends. And so it was built on a lot of just kind of without all the frills and trying to impress each other. It was just pure friendship and built on that support. And so, yeah, we've been married for, I can't math fast enough, 5.5 years. We have a dog, our fur baby.
Congratulations to both of you. I love to hear people that find somebody to share life with. I've always felt we're fundamentally social creatures, and just like you didn't feel in school and even in your faith community a real connection except with your family, that we're wired for connection and we're wired to share lives with each other. So I'm grateful, Aiden, that you have Mary and obviously your mother, Marsha, and that you've gotten on with your life. Look at what you've accomplished from an academic standpoint. That's a big deal, what you've accomplished. I hope you understand that. And there's a lot of studying and a lot of long nights and a lot of wondering where this is all going to lead. But now to have this good job in a charter school and just sort of now opening the door for a wonderful career. So congratulations. That's awesome. And as a parent, that's what I just hope for my kids, is they're able to get on with their life and make good choices. I sometimes get analytical, and I think of, with 10 being your best emotional health and 1 being your worst emotional health, and that's sort of when maybe we were close to dying by suicide. Where are you now on that 1 to 10 scale, with 10 being the best? And where were you? Because I'm just sensing that number is much higher. So give us sort of quantify that for our listeners.
Yeah, I would say, I think 10 is pretty rare for probably most people.
That's honest.
There are moments, right? I would say moments of 10s a lot these days, right? But I think maybe if you average it out between everything, probably closer to like a 7 or 8. So maybe I should give some context to this. In high school, towards the end of high school, I guess, just after high school, I think, I was seeing a therapist. I made ultimately the choice to start taking some antidepressants to help with my anxiety and my depression. And then about 6 months ago, I actually made the decision to try to stop them because I'd been on them for 12 years. I thought, I will never know if I can regulate myself. Was my transition a lot of that anxiety and a lot of that depression? But I was so scared for a while to stop taking them. And every year my psychiatrist would ask me if I wanted to. And I always had a reason. It was like, well, I'm getting married in 6 months. I don't think I should. And then I'm finishing school. I don't think I should. I'm starting grad school. I don't think I should. And actually, one of the last times he had asked me before I actually decided to not take it, my father-in-law had passed away. And I just was like, I don't really think this is a good time for me to stop taking my antidepressants. And I had a realization probably about a year later that, yes, these are challenges and sort of unexpected things that happen in my life, right? Or in life in general. But those things are going to keep happening, right? School or work or stress or unfortunate incidences. And that shouldn't be my reason for taking them. I felt like the true test actually of my mental health would be to not take them and see what happens when some of these things happen. And so, yeah, in October, basically it was like October, which is terrible. Actually, then I think about that, and that's funny. That was probably terrible timing too. It was like a month before our 5-year wedding anniversary. We were going to go on this big trip to Hawaii, and I was like, I'm going to stop taking my antidepressants. And so I think to consider that right now, I would say probably I average about a 7 or 8, taking into the days that maybe I'm more stressed or things are going on at work or life. And to me, it just speaks to sort of the impact.
What were you in high school?
Sort of the impact of it. Oh, in high school? Oh, yeah. I probably hovered at best at a 3 or 4. I would say maybe the days that I was playing golf and winning, maybe a 5.
Yeah. And are you off?
But it was very rare.
And when you went off antidepressants, I think you're off now. Did your number go down?
I did I mean, when I stopped them, I didn't notice for a while actually anything different, and then I did have some dips because I realized that I'd spent a good portion of my adolescence and the years that I would have really learned how to regulate myself, sort of with a buffer and kind of a shield around some of that. And so I started feeling like I would have these really strange emotions that I feel like were dampened, not gone because antidepressants didn't take them away, but I think like I started to feel, if I was upset, I could feel myself really upset. And I was like, this is strange. Like, why am I so angry? Or why am I so upset? Or why am I so sad? Or why am I so happy? Like, I would get really happy too. A very interesting experience. But it did dip for a couple months in there it was just kind of hard to judge where I would be at. But it never dropped as low as I was in high school. So I would say if I had to average that in those times of the sort of regulating myself and kind of leveling out, I would say at worst it was a 5, or maybe a 4 as compared to high school where it was much lower. So.
And we have this sort of, I don't know if it's an LDS thing or a Christian thing. It sort of says, by your fruits you shall know them. And so sometimes when we come across a situation, a good person or a situation, we sort of try to figure out if it's a good thing by the resulting, the fruit, I think, to use a fruit tree example. Not that anybody here's a fruit tree, sorry about that. But then I look at your life since you've come out as trans, as a transgender man, and I look at every metric that as a parent I would measure you, and I'm not your parent, or everything we'd hope for somebody in society or what we want people to accomplish is what you're accomplishing, Aiden. And I get really tenderhearted because you've been in a really difficult spot. And because you've been able to come out, to me, obviously, you're in a better spot, but you're also contributing to society. And isn't that what we want? Is, great men like you to be able to pursue your dreams and master's degrees and now contributing. And you're pretty young in your career, you're 31 and you're going to have decades of contributing back to society, not only sharing your story as a transgender man, but with your skills at work. And so to me, I look at who you are, and it doesn't cost me anything to just honor you as a transgender man, to use the name Aiden, to not have to wonder what level of transition socially or medically you've done. To me, it's just a sign of respect that I call you Aiden, and I recognize your gender identity, and I just want to support you and put my hands on your back as you're making your way going forward in your life. And so that's why I'm honored to have you share your story. And let's go back to Marsha as you're hearing your son. And I love what you said that LDS woman said about Aiden. You actually said 3 things, and I wrote down 2: kind, compassionate, and
confident.
And confident.
Yes.
And you've got this now son that no son's perfect. Our kids aren't perfect. I assume Aiden's not perfect. But how does it make you feel to see Aiden succeeding in life like this? And then also kind of share why you and Aiden decided to talk about this and share your story with others.
Well, I think I did kind of allude to the fact that I'm just so proud of him. Um, he could have chosen a different path, but I think he has allowed this journey to really define him as a positive person that wants to make a contribution to society. So, I really am so proud of him. I also feel so honored and privileged because whenever we speak, I get to hear more of his story. And how many parents that have older children get to really hear these vulnerable feelings of their kids, So I think the work that we've done and the area that we're in allows this authenticity and vulnerability to be comfortable. I can't imagine if we weren't doing a podcast or speaking that I'd say, Aiden, tell me what's going, what's going on. Tell me the deep, parts of your life or, how you feel. That probably wouldn't happen. But,
That's cool.
Doing these podcasts or being, he is his real self. I am my real self. And, we've had some really amazing conversations when we wrote our book.
Tell us about your book.
Which I brought a copy for you, Richard.
Thank you, Marsha.
It's called Two Spirits, One Heart. There were so many parts of our journey that I really felt ashamed of myself. And so basically this book is written from a mother's perspective, but Aiden, it's his story, my story, and he went through every page and edited with me like, oh, Mama, maybe this is a little bit off here, So, and I remember we were sitting at the computer one time and, I just said, Aiden, I wish I could go back and be a better mother when you were in high school. I wish I could have advocated for you more so you weren't so alone. And I wish I could have done more so that you would feel supported. And he said, Mama, everything I went through has made me the man I am today. And so I think writing this book and doing all the work that we're doing has been really, really healing. It's allowed me to heal from some of the stuff that I've gone through so that I can really love him with my whole heart and not kind of hold back because I feel bad.
It's honest.
So, this book I think has helped that piece. Of course, we wrote it to help other people as well. And it was interesting because it was easy in the beginning to start writing. And then we got to the really hard parts. There's parts that I'm not so proud of my reaction, but we put it all in there because, people, they don't just want to see how good you were, how well you handled. They want to see the real parts too. So, I think it's really been a very healing part of our journey. And another piece that we're really proud of something that we put out into the world. And we hope will help people, just like this podcast that you're doing, Richard,
And we'll link to this book, Two Spirits, One Heart. We'll link in our social media posts and the podcast post to this book. You do this full time now. So, you're in Salt Lake City. We're taping this on a Friday in August, and the next tomorrow on a Saturday, we're doing an LGBTQ workshop. So why did you step in the space sort of full time, Marsha?
People kept saying, oh, you're an advocate, you're an activist. And I would say, no, I'm just a mother who loves my son. And that's what and people kept pointing that out to me, no, you're an activist. I said, no, I'm just a mother who loves my son. One day I woke up and I thought, if this world is going to change, then I'm going to do something to be part of it. So I know that I've contributed to a world that's going to be safer for Aiden and that he's going to be able to live the best life that he can. So I don't know, one day it just happened. And, when you make that decision, all of a sudden things come out of the woodwork. People want you to come speak. People want you to do this. That's how the book got written, because I was writing another book about charter schools and it just wasn't going well. It just wasn't my passion. And so the consultant that I was working with, a literary consultant, said, Marsha, the book that you should be writing is the one about you and Aiden. And I said, really? And he goes, oh, yeah, that's the story that needs to be out there. And you talk about this love that you have for your son and what he went through. So, I think that's what happened. I started out because I loved my son. But as I started to do this work, I started to fall in love with this community. And you always, I think there's a point where you think, this is my path, this is where I'm supposed to go. And so that's what happened. And opportunities would come. I was asked to be on a board at PFLAG and, speak at different places. Aiden and I were invited to the White House to meet President Obama.
Wow.
And that was like Aiden calls it an epic moment.
Agreed.
Yeah. And so, when all these things come up, you just keep following your heart and you just keep giving as much as you can. And so that's kind of what happened. I retired in 2011. I actually worked for the same charter school that Aiden works for now. And I just said, this is what I want to do full time. I want to, go speak, write. I'm a columnist for a Japanese newspaper. And I'm on a diversity and inclusion. I'm a co-chair for that committee with PFLAG, and also we started a conference for the Japanese American LGBTQ community about 5 years ago. So I can't do it working full time. So, it's just kind of like I've been led to this place and even to you today through Emerson and Darcy. And I don't know, it's where I want to be.
It's good you're here. And I'm thinking one of the things I hear sometimes is trans people, I don't believe this, Aiden, about you or about trans people. They're just kind of confused. And they might even go to LGBT organizations, get more confused, or a therapist and get more confused. So some would say this is just people that are confused. But I bring that up just to kind of dispel that myth that I look at your life, Aiden, and who you are and what you're able to accomplish and your emotional strength and your marriage and how you're giving back to society. And I don't think you're confused because I look at where you were in high school and your emotional health and your feeling of sort of gender dysphoria or mismatch or just not being comfortable. And I look at where you are now. So I'm very at peace that this is who you are and who you were meant to be. And that now you can go on and live your life. So that's not really for you. That. It's sort of for my audience that sometimes might think that. And I wrote this, and then I want to give it back to Aiden for some final comments. I wrote this on my Facebook post, which is mostly an LDS audience, but it'll give you an idea of our listeners that where I'm coming from. Being transgender is not the result of Satan, sign of the last days, or society going downhill. It's not a mental illness. It's not a sin, just like identifying as gay or lesbian is not a sin. Before making these statements, please listen to our transgender friends. Sometimes we make these statements to keep things in a nice, tidy box for us, but it might actually keep us from learning new and factually accurate information and stretch us to put prior conclusions aside. And our prior conclusions may add to the burden of others. While some may feel being trans conflicts with the family a proclamation of the world, and that's an LDS document that I believe in, many of our transgender friends' feelings align with the gender is eternal language. I had to listen to my trans friends to understand this. At first, this space was complicated for me. It took listening and being open to learn new things, letting go of earlier opinions, but now it's easy to listen, call someone by their preferred name, recognize their gender, and love and accept them as a fellow human being. That costs me nothing. That means everything to them. I did this because of my baptism covenants as an active Latter-day Saint to bear, mourn, and comfort. It's been transforming to me to have transgender people in my life and the things they teach me on how to be a better disciple of Christ. I realized I didn't need to give up any of my beliefs in or commitment to our LDS church to accept my transgender friends and honor their lived experiences. So that's just a little bit of my journey. And one other thing I want to read before I hand this back to you, Aiden, for some final comments is I love this idea of Henry Norwin, a religious writer, and he talks about the wounded healer. And a lot of my listeners hear this on every podcast, so they're rolling their eyes. But it's this idea, a minister's service, and that's who both of you are. A minister's service will not be perceived as authentic unless it comes from a heart wounded by the suffering about which he speaks. The great illusion of leadership is to think others can be led out of the desert by someone who's never been there. And so we're all the wounded healers. We all have really difficult things in our life, but that's why, Aiden, you're a hero to me, because you're alive, and now you're leading other people out of the desert. And I know that how many LGBTQ people have reached out to you, and Mary, who understands LGBTQ, and you're healing people because you know that road. And what Marsha's doing also, you're a little wounded as you talk in that book, and we've all said things we wish we hadn't said or wish we'd done better, but you're taking that information and then healing and giving vision and walking other parents out the desert. So I think that's a great responsibility that we each have to take our experiences and help other people. So both of you are heroes to me for this is a beautiful love story. And Aiden, just any final comments as we're wrapping up, and maybe I'll see if your mom has some final she has a final comment too. So Aiden, we'll send it back to you for any comments you have, and maybe any advice you have for parents or younger LGBTQ people.
Sure. Okay. Let's see here. Well, I really want to say thank you to you for kind of this opportunity. I think my experience with faith hasn't always been the most glamorous, and so it's something that I don't hold grudges over, or I've made peace with. But I think the more that we've had the opportunity to engage and reconnect with faith-based groups, I think this gives me sort of more, I don't know, just opens up my mind a little bit more to something that I kind of had given up on, when my church sort of said that this wasn't really the place for me. And so I think I really appreciate the things that you wrote on your Facebook, or the things that you've shared, because I think it's hard anytime too that to kind of break away maybe from, or to I don't know, open up the mind, or in a way that maybe people thought wasn't possible or shouldn't be allowed. And I know Emerson kind of went out on a limb to support us and invite us in, and I would assume that may be the case for you as well. And so I really appreciate that, and just kind of you're willing to do that for us. So.
You bet. And I realize, it's part of my religious beliefs that want me to do this. So I don't, at first I saw a potential conflict and thought I had to give up something, but then I just thought, no, this is the core of my religion, is to love and learn and understand and lift others' burdens. And so, but I understand the road you've been on with your own faith that invited you to leave. And so I admire your just kindness, is that space has kind of bitten you a little bit. And so it'd be easier to be real binary and just say all of that world is going to be painful for me. And that's just kind of one of your points of emotional maturity, Aiden, is that you're recognize that there's good there. And you're saying very kind things about the LDS faith or experiences you've had. And so that's a sign of a lot of what I would call spiritual and emotional maturity in you. And that's a credit to you and just the core character that you are. And you need to hear that, because it's really true, Aiden. And I now get a little tears in my eyes, even though you're in a car in California and I'm sitting in Salt Lake. So And you have a great life ahead of you, Aiden. And the God I believe in loves you and loves all his LGBTQ children. And I think you're created the way he intended to. I don't think something went sideways and he's doing a head face palm up in heaven going, oh no, what happened? I think this is just part of the beautiful needed diversity that is part of his plan for his children. And part of that is so we can better learn and grow and support each other. So I as an ally, am trying to bring voice to LGBTQ people, but in some ways you are rescuing me and teaching me how to treat other people the way the God I believe in would want us to treat others. So now I gave you the last word and I just went off on my own little spiel. So
Oh no, you're fine. No, I appreciate that. In terms of advice though, I think I don't have kids yet, so I can't say it's easy or not easy. But I think that in general, what I find to be really helpful in my own experience and the experience of some of the youth that we've worked with through our PFLAG chapter is just that having parents to just really just listen to what their child is saying. It doesn't mean they have to do what they're saying, and it doesn't mean to listen. It's not a command or a demand. But really hear what their child is saying and listen to some of the emotion behind that, because I think kids they might be afraid to say exactly the words that would be really transparent and easy, but they might hint at something to try to feel it out. And I think if you're really listening to your child or to a family friend or somebody you'll hear it because you know them and you love them. And so you'll hear that in their voice, or that hesitation and sort of that wondering, if I tell you more, what will happen, and I think so many youth that we've worked with, Mary and I have worked with our PFLAG chapter, and just in the volunteering that we've done, that just doesn't always happen. I think life gets busy, and I understand that too. And so a lot of conversation takes place in multitasking. So it's cooking dinner and asking your kids about the day. And sometimes it sort of just becomes like a checkbox, okay, how was your day? It was good. And not really listening to the message underneath that. And sort of really sit down and kind of have those conversations and kind of listen to sometimes what's not as easily seen or heard. And I also think it's difficult, but reaching out for support to organizations like PFLAG or, whatever, if there's a local center or someplace that like a community organization that can provide resources, I think is, it could be life-changing. PFLAG definitely did that for my family. And I think that it's scary, right, to reach out and ask for help, but that's what those organizations are there for. And it's really a judgment-free place. It's about giving that support, as humans to each other.
Thank you.
I think that's all I got.
Thank you, Aiden, and well done. I love your advice. Marsha, your final thoughts.
Well, Aiden talked about PFLAG, so is it okay if I just give the website?
Please.
Because I think it could be a good resource. And it is www, and PFLAG is pflag.org, O-R-G. And if you go there, you can look to see a local chapter that you can go and visit if you want to, or you could send them an email and maybe they'll respond. I don't know, Aiden, if you want to put your email or my email. So people, after they hear this, if they have a question, if they want to reach out to us, do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah, and I'll circle back with you and we'll write a podcast description and we can decide to put that in there.
Okay.
That's great.
Yeah. And I kind of wanted to just highlight one person. His name is George Dewson. Do you know George?
I do know George.
And he's coming out to California to share his story with us at the CCEJ. We're doing an LGBTQ symposium. And I looked at his website, thepeculiar.org, and he's collecting stories. So, I mean, there's a lot of people doing amazing work. And I really want to thank you, Richard, for having us on. I think that the name of your podcast is so beautiful. Listen, learn, and love. Is that correct?
That's it, Marsha.
And it's, I think what Aiden was talking about is that if we as parents could just listen, learn, and love our children, wow, that would just be such an amazing connection and for our families. So anyway, thank you.
So Aiden, thank you. Mary, thank you for we're counting you on the podcast, Mary, by the way, because you're sitting there driving and been such a big part of this story.
I'll tell her. She has no idea because she's just driving and I have headphones in, but I'll tell her she's now been.
You're a true millennial with headphones in. And Mary and Aizumi, is that how it's
correct?
Aizumi, Aizumi, and thank you for being on the podcast. President and Sister Firsch, Emerson and Darcy, thank you for your leadership creating Zion in the Long Beach East Stake and just helping. I have the Pool of Bethesda picture. It's a Christian story of Christ going to those that have the hardest road in our home here. And I look at that and I think of who are the most marginalized, not because God marginalized them, because society marginalized them. And what's then my responsibility as a non-marginalized person to reach out and bring them in. And so that's the focus of this podcast, and grateful for all the people in our communities that are doing that. And thank our listeners. And I want to give a shout out to Tom Garbett, our producer. I always forget to thank him, but he's awesome. And thank our listeners for joining us on another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler.